address the audience, and then the questions will come in over here. Okay. And we're going live. I think we're live. We can actually check on the phone, which is always a good thing to check on the phone. So let's just do typical checks. I always just check to make sure we're actually live. What's
your channel?
I don't remember how to check.
Oh yeah, here you are. I think it's Ask Me Anything, right?
Yeah.
Live chat.
Live?
We're live.
Can we check the volume on there? Yeah, it looks good. Okay, we can close that. Okay, cool. We're live. All right, so thanks everyone for joining. We are doing our weekly live stream. I missed last week's. We have a special guest, if you notice here. This is Eric Ho. Yeah. He is my fraternity brother and pledge brother, but he's also a dentist. So maybe we'll ask him some questions about dentistry as we go along.
Sure.
So as always, in the beginning, just to mention, if you have questions, make sure you leave it in the Google form. It's in the description of the video. Make sure you leave it down there, and I'll get to it in the next weekly live stream. But let's go ahead and start with the first question today. First question was submitted by Carrie from Wisconsin, and this question is about pharmacy, and I think it's going to pertain to dentistry here with Eric too. So Carrie says, I am a P4 with interviews at smaller community. Wait, I am a P4 with interviews. It's residency season right now.
Yeah.
At smaller community programs, VAs, and a larger institution. I feel very blessed and lucky to have such an array of options. Pretty diverse.
Yeah, that's good.
So Carrie says, I'm sorry if you've answered this. However, I can't seem to find a straightforward answer online. What do you believe are pros and cons to small versus large hospital residencies? And does it matter in the long run? I imagine, do you guys run into this in dentistry?
Yeah. In dentistry, we do residency as well. They're generally 1 year, depending on the type of program you're in.
Sorry to interrupt. Is it required?
No, not required.
Okay.
Yeah.
But you did a residency.
Totally optional. I did, yeah.
Okay. All right. Sorry.
No, it's okay. I was just saying there's a variety of residencies. I'm sure like in pharmacy, could be 1 year general residency. Could be 3 years, 4 years, depending on the specialty.
What's the ones that are 3 to 4 years?
More special degrees like orthodontics, endodontics, and oral maxillofacial surgery.
Okay.
Yeah. Prosthodontics too.
I feel like I don't really know much about dentistry, but maybe I'm curious from your perspective. I'll share mine after this. But when considering residency, what do you think about this? Are there pros and cons to choosing a small versus a large hospital residency? And second part, does it really matter in the long run?
Yeah, I'll just speak from personal experience. I don't have a lot of experience with a smaller hospital system. I went to a program in Akron, Ohio by Cleveland, and it was about close to 1,000 bed hospital, so it was a relatively bigger size hospital system. But I did interview at a few areas all over. They were moderate size to big size hospitals, so I don't know too much about the smaller size hospitals. But I guess my point is that the bigger hospitals, from what I noticed, they do offer a lot of resources. They have a lot of departments, HR, they have different clinical departments as well. They also offer different benefits depending on the program you're in. Mine was a stipend program, so they paid for me to do the residency, and also they gave us benefits like meals, parking, also even a gym membership too. So that was one of the benefits of that. Yeah.
Okay. I'll try to take a stab at this. So again, the question for those who may be joining, this is evaluating residency programs, small versus large, kind of pros and cons, and if it really matters in the long run. So I actually did mine's. Both organizations I did it at were fairly large organizations, so I can't speak from a small program perspective, but I can speak in that my first year residency was in a community hospital, and then my second year residency was in an academic medical center, and there was huge differences. But so I can't speak from experience from a small program, but I would say like I think the obvious ones is that large programs are probably more reputable, probably more well known. So you have that prestige, so to say. At the same time, I remember talking to a couple of folks, and this is just our opinions, that in pharmacy specifically, as long as you do a residency, like having that PGY1 on your record, it's not as important in the long run. And I think partly why that conversation came about was because my plan was always to go to a second year residency, and for pharmacy to do that second year accredited residency, we just needed that first year residency. So we've always felt like if you're gonna go do a second year residency anyways, that the first one didn't really matter, specifically if it was done at a small, large organization per se. What I think really makes a difference for us is that the amount of effort you put into a residency program, like ours, it could fluctuate a little bit, but in general, the amount of effort you put into a residency program is, the benefits that you get out. So you can go to a small program, a large program, a community hospital, an academic medical center, a terrible program, or a really good program. I think the biggest factor in driving your success and the amount you learn is actually yourself. That's what I think. But does it matter in the long run? I don't think so. Not so much. Maybe you have some comments on that, but I'll make one more comment and maybe I'll turn it back to you. Well, one thing is, like, I don't think so as much, but I do know that there's always certain people that do care about prestige. Sometimes the amount of connections you make, the amount of opportunities you have, especially on rotations, the people you meet. Like some really large organizations, you get to work with very prominent pharmacists and other clinicians that I don't think the smaller programs can offer sometime. I feel like I didn't do the question justice, but what were you gonna say?
No, I was gonna piggyback off of that. I think you make a great point. The bigger hospital systems or bigger programs may have more of that prestige. Sometimes employers do kind of look into that. They're more familiar with bigger name hospitals or bigger name programs. They'll recognize it readily. Say like Columbia or somewhere in New York. They all understand that. The other thing, you kind of touched upon this briefly, but sometimes the more well-known programs, they attract better preceptors. So you may actually have a better experience at those programs. It may not be across the board. You may have a community program that has great faculty, great preceptors. But I think one of the driving decisions you should make is, are you going to get the experience you want, and are you going to learn what you want to learn from the people there? And you really want to do your homework when it comes to figuring out who teaches and who's the director of the program, so you can understand what you're going to be able to get out of that program. And especially if it's a PGY1, it's a 1 year, it's very quick, it's over with in a flash.
Yeah, that's a good point. Usually you have your better preceptors, relatively speaking, they attract better preceptors, right, more likely than the smaller programs. Another thing I will say is, like, are you a fan of Malcolm Gladwell?
Yeah, I am.
Have you ever read David and Goliath?
I have not read David and Goliath.
And I wonder if it's even from that book, but I think it's from that book. There is Malcolm Gladwell is a author that I really like. He talks about something very similar in terms of choosing colleges and choosing a less known, maybe like local college versus like a well-known, large, perhaps Ivy League college. And what they found in there was that if you're a really good candidate, and anyone that's applying for pharmacy, residency is optional for us. So usually you have people who are more ambitious that go for residency. So assuming that you're really good at your field, you're a big fish, what they saw is that people who went to the local state colleges seemed to excel well down the road. Like, I don't remember what they measured, but it was like hard outcomes. Like, did better in life, maybe had better careers, better earning potential, things like that, versus someone who went to, let's say, a Ivy League college. And the reason why, it was like big fish, little pond, versus little fish in big pond. And it just made it more difficult. You're more stressed. So you were less likely to succeed, if not just became an average person, if you went to the Ivy League or the more prestigious organization. So there's things to be said about that. You can go to a small program and perhaps get more opportunities, more responsibility, depending on how proactive you are. You could do very well in a small program. But I thought that was very fascinating that Malcolm Gladwell talked about that.
Yeah, very true.
That's interesting. So we have a question from Wuyep. Is it advisable to work in a hospital or a lab? I guess it depends on the context of the question. Is this like for residency? Is this for a job? Is this as a student? Like what can you define the context a little bit more? I think in general, so I don't know I'm kind of curious about you. So for pharmacy, I always encourage my students to work somewhere. It doesn't matter if it's a hospital or lab, but just work somewhere so you have some practice experience. A lot of students don't work and they just learn the academic side, and I don't think that's as good. And they don't see as much, actual operations. Like, are you guys required to do like internships and stuff like that? Like,
it's a little different with dentistry. In dentistry, we try to really work on our skills, our hand skills more so. We'd have the didactics in the beginning year, second year, and then the third and fourth years when you're really applying those didactic information to hands-on training. So our curriculum is built so that we do have the clinical aspect of what we're learning built into it. So we don't really go and work on the side while we're still studying. Because in clinic, it does take up a lot of time. It's kind of like a full work day. You'll see patients, you'll treat them, and you'll practice basically what you learned in your classes. So a little different from that approach, but I imagine in pharmacy, it would help. It would be very beneficial to apply the knowledge that you're learning from your classes into a real world situation where they learn the operations of, say, maybe a hospital or a lab. Yeah.
So what do you think about that question? Is it advisable to do work in a hospital or lab for a job?
I mean, I think if you can land a job opportunity while you're in school, that's always a benefit, and balance the course load as well. You definitely want to do well in your courses, but also learn from on-the-job training. I think it can really benefit you and set you above your peers. I think employers do like to see you have practical knowledge and that you have some of that experience, and that might make you a more competitive applicant to whatever you're going to look for in the future.
Yeah, I think if that job entails being in a hospital or a lab, certainly always good to have some type of experience in those. So I think either would be good.
Either would be good.
Question from ZNED. Currently a P3. What can I do to stand out when applying for a residency?
That's a good question.
That's a good question. I'm kind of curious if dentistry does this as well. So for residency, when programs evaluate candidates, what we do is, well, I shouldn't say we. This is what the majority of programs do. There's like a checklist, and then applicants that score the highest on the checklist get invited for a in-person interview. So maybe a spot has 25, or actually no, let's say they have 4 residency spots. Typically, you would extend invites for 4 to 5 times that amount. So there'd be like 16 to 20 people that get invited to that interview. And how we invite them is based on this checklist. And that checklist is things like, you hear about all the time, GPA. Maybe you have above 3.2 GPA, you get 3 points. Extracurriculars. If you have 3 leadership positions, you get 3 points. If you have 2 leadership positions, maybe you get 2 points. And if you have no leadership positions, maybe you get 0 points. Letter of intent, when you're writing to it, they'll score you on that. Maybe you get 3 points if it's really good, 1 if it's really bad, something like that. But there's different things, and you can actually find a lot of different articles that talk about what are the factors that people look for in residency. So the common ones are GPA, extracurriculars, leadership positions. Practice experience was actually pretty up on there. And let's see, what else do we have? Recommendation letters, of course. So recommendation letters. Those are like the most common ones, but every single program is a little different. There are some that are unique. For example, Some programs give you points if you go and attend their booth at mid-year. Mid-year is a pharmacy conference that's held every year.
Okay.
But like those are very unique ones. So if you attended their booth, they're like, oh, they'll give you another point or something. Or if you contacted them before mid-year, they'll give you another point. But I wouldn't worry so much about those. I would focus on the key factors like GPA, letters of rec, letter of intent, extracurriculars, leadership positions, things like that.
Yeah.
What do you guys do that? Something like that?
I would say it's very similar. There's always going to be your list of things that you want to accomplish. You want to make sure that you show you're a great candidate, show that you're a competitive candidate, and how to be competitive. You have to do well in your field. They want someone that can function and perform the tasks that they ask you to do, and also learn additional information on the job as well. So you have to show that you have good GPA. Like Brian was saying, you also want to participate in extracurriculars, like a club of some sort. What was your role in that club? Were you a member? Were you on the executive board? Were you a president of that club? I think that if the higher your role, the more likely they will consider talking with you because you show leadership. And a lot of programs do like to see that. They want to kind of see people excel and be more outgoing, and that's because, as you guys may know, residency is optional, so it's not required by any state, right? So,
okay,
yeah,
very interesting. I had a follow-up question to that in general. Oh yes. So for those who are new tuning in, Eric is a dentist, so it's like a very different dichotomy here with how we're approaching the questions. But out of curiosity, is it what percentage do you think graduating dentists enter a residency?
Yeah.
Do you know, like, roughly?
Yeah, that's a very good question. In dentistry, just like in pharmacy, residency is not required. It's optional, completely optional. There's multiple programs in dentistry similar to pharmacy. It really depends on what you want to go into. There's very special programs like endodontics, prosthodontics, orthodontics, but there's always the 1-year PGY1 of general. So you just learn and do everything broadly. So the what was the question again?
I'll give you an example.
Yeah.
I'm curious, what percentage of graduating dental students actually go for residency?
It depends on the school. Some schools, I would say more of the Ivy League schools, really train their undergraduate students, and we say undergraduate being like dental students or the pharmacy students, and they really train their undergrad to go into specialties. So some schools like UPenn or maybe even Harvard, you would see a high percentage of those undergraduate students go into specialty programs. Maybe even like 80%, 90% of the class would go into those programs. In schools that are known to be more on the general side, they don't have as many specialty programs within that school, or their specialty programs aren't as developed as some other universities, then you may only see a 30% or even lower percentage of the class go into programs, because most of those students would like to just go out and into the workforce and start earning a living and start their career. Yeah.
Out of curiosity, I feel like I should just interview you because I'm so curious about what the dental life is like. But just out of curiosity, what is the average salary in the U.S. for like a dentist if they just graduated without residency?
That's a tough one.
I know it varies, but can you give me like a ballpark?
Yeah.
Maybe like a range?
It's probably 110, 120, I would say, is the average from graduating from a 4-year program. 110, 120.
Okay, interesting.
And if you finished a residency program, it's probably 150, 160 or higher. You can definitely negotiate much higher of a salary. And if you've had a couple years of experience, it can definitely be in 200,000 range.
Okay, interesting. So very large range.
Yeah. I think in general it's about 110, 120 from a new grad. Yeah.
Okay. All right, we're going to come back to the live chat questions in a second. I know there was a question that someone asked me recently about informatics related, and I know a lot of my audience is informatics, so I want to take this one. I'm going to not say some of the names mentioned in here because this is a private message, but there's a student that messaged me. Let's see. So they completed rotations recently, which I'm assuming, so they're a 4th-year student originally thought about going for a PGY1 and then a PGY2 in pharmacy informatics, but it looks like I'm assuming the interviews didn't come around. So again, it's residency season, so I'm assuming the interviews weren't extended to you. So kind of unfortunate. It is kind of competitive. So this person is saying they are now considering going for a master's degree in health informatics right after graduation. I am looking at programs with a heavy emphasis on practical training and diverse partnerships in the field. Also, while doing that, I would get CPHIMS certified. What are your thoughts about going this route? Let's see. I don't know if I want to read the last part. It's very like...
What's CPHIMS, like informatics? Or?
Yeah, so CPHIMS is a certification we have in informatics. It's not specific to pharmacy. Mm-hmm. It's more of a general thing that teaches you about informatics. Oh, okay. And to be honest, I've never taken the exam, so I can't comment more on it. But for my colleagues that have taken it, many of my colleagues actually have taken it. They have done it because it's more of a widely recognized certification. Mm-hmm. I hear very mixed things about it being beneficial or not in our field, but I've promoted it quite a bit on my channel before, just because a lot of people have taken it. Mm-hmm. So I'm sorry, I don't know if you have any questions, but I'll comment on here. But I'm curious if you have any thoughts when I respond to this. So the first thing I'll say here is, I think it's very common in America that if we don't get to the next step, that we continue to pursue higher education. And that's actually what happened to me. I don't know if you know, but I didn't match for my PGY1. I scrambled, but in the scramble process for I think maybe like 3 weeks, I also contemplated a master's. And I think it's very common that, I don't know, when we don't get to the next step, we think about pursuing additional education.
Very reasonable.
I think that that's kind of interesting. One, I always think that if you can get a job without additional degrees or credentials, you should do it because tuition costs a lot of money in our country. So I think the practical point of that is that if you can, try to apply for jobs now in informatics, because I'm assuming that's what you're trying to do. Try to apply for jobs to see if anyone would be interested in training you and investing in you. It's just that you never know, and if you can bypass, let's say, a master's or 2 years of residency or whatever, it's an opportunity that you never know. Sometimes it's right time, right place. The second thing is master's degree in health informatics. So let's see, the next one launched. I think that anyone that's pursuing an informatics pathway, getting a master's in informatics is good. Any formal training in informatics is good because I would say there aren't many formal pathways into informatics, and having taken formal classes in informatics myself, I would say that I've learned a lot, even though I've done 2 years of residency and have practiced in informatics for many years. There was a lot of benefit in doing so I did about 30 credits in bioinformatics through my MPH program, and I've gained a lot. The way you think about things, the way you approach problems, the resources you learn how to navigate, I think there's a lot of benefit in doing a master's in informatics. With that said, I know that AMIA, which is American Medical Informatics Association, only endorses a couple of programs in informatics, be it bachelor's, master's, PhDs, fellowships, because informatics right now is it's all over the place. We have a lot of disagreements on what is the ideal informatics pathway, what should be ideally included in an informatics curriculum. Because of that, doing a master's degree in informatics, the success, I would say, almost depends on where you do it. And I would look towards AMIA as my first source to see what are the programs they endorse first, because I think that's, as a collective, they probably have a better way of vetting that. Do you have any thoughts about that? Like, I don't know, this is not in your field at all, but do you have any thoughts?
No, I mean, I am not too familiar with informatics as much as you and your audience is. But I think like what you were talking about in the beginning about how we try to continue our education, we try to learn and improve ourselves to get to the next step. There's always that drive for a lot of people going into residency, getting into the program, their choice, and then after that program, doing what they want to do in their career. I think for this individual, I would just consider what is your ultimate goal to do long term. I mean, to do a 1-year PGY2 in informatics, okay, that's a 1-year program. What are you planning to do going forward from there? And your alternative is to look for a master's degree in informatics, which is understandable because you want to be in informatics. But after that, what is the goal and what do you want to do? Because there's many ways to get to that goal. It really, you really have to consider that. And that's kind of how I see it. Other than that, I am not too familiar with the informatics degrees and the programs out there, but it sounds like there's many ways to achieve what you want to get out of there.
I'd say your answer is actually better than mine. Way better. That's actually the advice I give to people more often than not, is that think about where you want to go first.
Yeah.
And then work your way back. Because, let's say a master's wasn't required for that. Then, it's probably a little overkill. Maybe residency isn't required for that. Maybe that's overkill. Like, figure out where you want to go, like what you were saying, and then maybe work your way back to see what you need to do to get there. Okay, we're going to switch back to the live chat. Let's see. We have, I'd like to know more about the conferences. I school in Algeria, by the way. I'd love to attend conference in other countries if there's an opportunity. I'm not sure exactly how to answer that question. If this is pertaining to pharmacy, I would say the most benefit, this is very biased, the conference that I personally am biased towards is ASHP mid-year. It is the largest gathering of health system pharmacists in the world. I think there's usually somewhere between 30 and 50,000 pharmacists that attend every year. So again, I don't know if you're talking about pharmacy per se, but I've always attended that conference since 2012. So it's been many years, and I've always found it very beneficial. But let's go to another question. Account says, would you recommend doing PGY2 right after PGY1, or would you suggest working for a few years first? That's a good question. Yeah, I get, let's see. So, I'll answer it from my perspective from informatics, and I don't know if this applies. This probably does not apply so much if you're looking for non-informatics roles, and I'm kind of curious if you think this too. So I did a PGY1 in pharmacy practice, and then I did a PGY2 in pharmacy informatics right after, and then I started working as an informatics pharmacist. If I were to ideally describe what my training pathway would have been, I would have wished I worked for a few years as a pharmacist. I don't know if it was better to do it before residency or in the middle of residency. I think the hesitancy comes in that if you look at the ASHP match rates for residency, the chances of you matching the further out from pharmacy school you are, or the further out from some residency training, so like PGY1, the lower your chances of matching. And I don't know if it's good advice to say, hey, I did a PGY1, let me work for a few years and then do a PGY2. Or let me not go into residency right away, work for a few years, and go into residency later. I don't know if that's good advice, so I feel very hesitant saying that. But what I can tell you, though, is I do wish that I had more practice experience as a pharmacist before going into my informatics role, because I feel as though as time goes on, I just get dumber because I'm not working as a pharmacist. I'm building tools for pharmacists, and then I lose experience. I lose knowledge when I'm not doing things. So I think that would have been my ideal training path. I'm not exactly sure how to answer the question, But I do know that for informatics right now, that we do try to do practice experience coupled with our informatics experience. So some informatics pharmacists staff as a pharmacist, like part of their FTE, and they also work as an informatics pharmacist. But I would say in your case, I don't know if you're talking about informatics or non-informatics PGY2. If it's a non-informatics PGY2, I don't think there's anything wrong for going straight into your PGY2. I would probably encourage that. Get it over with. Even adjusting to the different levels of pay in residency versus a pharmacist job is huge. Does that matter for you guys? But you guys, it's not just like PGY2. Usually your post PGY1 residencies are like a couple years long, right?
Yeah, so sometimes what people would do to get into those better residency programs, they would do a PGY1 to bump up their resume. Say maybe your undergrad, maybe your pharmacy school, your GPA wasn't as high, so you wanted to kind of do more schooling to show that you can be a high functioning individual. So you would go into a PGY1 and then continue onwards from there. Another thing I think you mentioned about it, to go straight into the PGY2, the benefit there is the letters of rec and the people that you can ask for some good feedback from. When you're more than a year out from your PGY1 and you haven't talked to your preceptor maybe in the last 6 months, it's more difficult to ask them for a letter and ask them for their recommendation if you don't keep up with them. When you're in your PGY1, you see them quite often and they know your personality. They can speak for you if they feel positive about your work and about how you are as a person. So it's much easier to get those recommendations when you're going from PGY1 straight into PGY2.
And the person that asked the original questions clarified and said non-informatics PGY2.
Oh, okay, there you go. Yeah.
I think even about that, asking for letters of rec and things like that, keeping in touch with people.
Yeah.
It makes me think that, when you're in that hustle mode. So for pharmacy students that pursue residency, they're super motivated, they're ambitious, they're ready to like jump on it and work a lot of long hours. I think if you took a break between that and you get used to working not those rigorous hours, you lose a little bit of steam and you might not be as motivated going back to a PGY2, which for PGY2s, different from PGY1s, you're less told what to do. You really have to be self-driven. Non-informatics PGY2, I almost want to say that you should go PGY1, PGY2, right into PGY2. Don't take a break and then just work right after. Like you want to just hustle. Keep that momentum going.
Yeah. I totally agree.
Question from CW says, I have a question about pharmacy residency interview. If you answered a clinical question wrong, would you be ranked lower or not be ranked at all? That's a very good question. I'm assuming this applies to you guys as well. So I would say it probably depends on the program. But if you answered a question wrong and that question killed a patient, theoretically, that's terrible. You might not get ranked. There are certain things that you say during a residency interview, and two things. One, if you are blatantly wrong and cause patient harm in your response, I think that is a good reason in some ways to not rank you, because they're like, you're I don't know, you're not ready to take on this residency. On the other hand, I think when approaching residency interviews or even real patient care, if you don't know something, say you don't know. I think that is so important. And I say this from experience where I have been in situations, this is what my mentor told me too, just if you don't know something, please do not say it. People believe and rely on your responses and information and knowledge as a pharmacist about drug information. Please don't say the wrong thing. Say you don't know something. You can say this on interviews too. Someone asks you a question, it's like, I don't know, but this is how I would find out. And there is more merit to tell someone that you don't know and how you would find out than blatantly saying the wrong answer. And I think if you are confident in saying the wrong answer, I think that's a bad thing, and I think that's a good reason to not rank a candidate. And that's just my opinion, though.
Yeah.
What do you think?
My question is, when you apply for residency normally from P4 year, have you already taken your boards? Do you submit your board scores to these programs? Do they see how well you're doing?
No.
So that's probably the reason why they ask these clinical questions, to kind of see what your understanding of the knowledge of your courses is, right? That's what I would guess. So it would be tough, I think, to rank someone if they did answer a clinical question wrong. They probably don't ask you a ridiculous question. They probably ask you a question that you have likely learned in your training or should have learned if you went to a accredited pharmacy program. So they're not going to try to trick you. That's not the purpose of those clinical questions when they're interviewing you. They're really trying to see if you have a good understanding of your knowledge. They also aren't looking for a perfect answer. You may not give them the perfect answer. They're most likely looking for how you think and how you can respond in a timely manner. Anyone can get the answer right if they spend a long time thinking about it or looking it up. But they want to know that you can think, straightforward and correctly, and answer in a good way. So.
Yeah, the thought process is a key word, is something we think about a lot. Mm-hmm. If you don't know something, that's what I was saying. If you don't know an answer, tell them how you're going to find it. Say, you know what, I don't know this answer on asthma, or but I do know that I have resources like Up to Date. I have Micromedics. I have the guidelines for asthma, which I actually don't remember right now. I think it's gold. But I just don't work with asthma as much. But you should know certain places where you're looked that up. Or you can say, you know what, I don't remember the guidelines off the top of my head, but I do know guidelines exist, and I would try to look for those guidelines and then look up what the recommendations are from those guidelines. So saying that out loud is really good. So saying thought process, like how you think.
Yeah.
Next question. Yes, it is pharmacy. Yeah, so for pharmacy, ASHP, mid-year clinical meeting, always happens in December. It was actually free this year, by the way, for all students and residents. So I don't know if it probably won't be next year, but I will look into that. What are the job opportunities for licensed pharmacists in pharmaceutical industry? That's a very good question, and this might be the last question if no one else asks questions, because technically these are only supposed to be 30 minutes. I'm trying to keep them short, and we're 7 minutes over. But this is maybe not a great question to end on. But the question is, what are the opportunities for pharmacists in pharmaceutical industry? I can't really answer it with that much confidence because I don't have much experience in industry. The one that always comes to mind is medical science liaisons. That is the main job I know, but I know that you can work in different areas of it. So medical science liaisons, my ignorant self only knows that these are people who typically have done a fellowship in pharmaceutical industry, usually with Rutgers being one of the most popular programs, usually I think they're 2-year programs, and they go talk to hospitals and organizations about drugs in a scientific and evidence-based basis. That's all I know about them. I know they're really good jobs. I do plan on having some folks from the pharmaceutical industry talk about the different job roles and job opportunities, but to be honest, I don't really know too much more about that. So, do you know anything about pharmaceutical industry?
I have no idea what the pharmaceutical industry is all about. But
for those who are joining a little later, Eric is a dentist, so very different perspective on things. Okay, so I think that is going to be the last question for today. Thank you guys for tuning in. We're going to try to do these weekly. We'll see you all next week. Thanks, you guys, for joining.
Thanks for having me, and good to see you guys.
See ya.
Bye. That's great. That's fun.